You're scrolling through some travel website at midnight and you find it. A round-trip flight for $280, a hotel for $89 a night. You start doing the math in your head and you're thinking, I can actually do this. 5 nights, cheap flight, maybe $800 total. That's basically nothing. I deserve this. So you start booking and everything looks great until you get to the checkout screen and suddenly your $800 vacation is $1,400 and you're sitting there wondering if you accidentally upgraded to first class or booked a suite, but you didn't. You booked the exact same trip. The price just decided to grow legs and walk away from you. This is happening to people constantly, and nobody talks about it because by the time you realize how much you actually spent, you're already on the beach trying to convince yourself it was worth it. The travel industry has turned hidden fees into an absolute science, and most people don't figure out the real cost of their budget vacation until they're home staring at a credit card statement that looks like it belongs to someone making a lot more money than they do. My name is Kai, and I spend way too much time thinking about money and why the things that are supposed to be affordable never actually are when you do the real math. If you're tired of planning trips that somehow cost twice what you budgeted and you want to understand where all that extra money is actually going, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button if this helps you stop getting blindsided by hidden travel costs. Here's something that might surprise you. The average American spent over $2,100 on their last vacation. And most of those people thought they were being smart about it. Budget flights, reasonable hotels, nothing crazy. Yet somehow, they came home with a credit card bill that made them question every financial decision they've made since high school. The truly shocking part isn't how much people spent. It's the gap between what they planned to spend and what they actually ended up spending. The problem isn't that people are bad at planning vacations. The problem is that the entire travel industry has been engineered to show you one price and charge you another. There's a reason that first number sticks so hard in your brain, and it has nothing to do with math. Every booking platform, every airline, every hotel chain has figured out that the best way to get you to commit is to show you the smallest possible number up front and pile on fees after you're already emotionally invested. And once you understand how this works, you'll never look at a travel deal the same way again. Let's start with flights, because that's usually where the fantasy begins. You see that $280 round-trip fare, and your brain immediately files it under affordable. But that $280 is the base fare. It's the skeleton of a ticket. It doesn't include anything that makes flying actually tolerable as a human experience. Want to pick your seat so you're not wedged between two strangers in the last row next to the bathroom? That's $30 to $60 each way. Want to bring a carry-on bag that's bigger than a purse? Some airlines are now charging $35 to $65 for overhead bin access. A checked bag? That's another $30 to $40 per bag, per direction. So if you're checking one bag each way and selecting a seat, your $280 flight just became $410. And we haven't even left the ground yet. Then there's the booking fee that some third-party sites tack on. The credit card foreign transaction fee, if you're traveling internationally, typically 3% on every purchase. Airport parking if you're driving, which runs $10 to $20 per day. 5 days of parking and you've added another $75 just for the privilege of leaving your car in a concrete garage. Your $280 flight has now ballooned to roughly $485, and you still think you got a deal because the original number is stuck in your head. That's not an accident. Airlines have entire departments dedicated to optimizing how they display pricing to make sure that first number is the one you remember, not the final one. Once you've mentally committed based on that low fare, you'll pay the extras because backing out feels like losing something you already had. But flights are just the appetizer. Let's talk about hotels, because this is where things get genuinely offensive. You booked that room for $89 a night. 5 nights, $445 total. Simple math, right? Except hotels have turned fees into a form of creative expression. First, there's the resort fee. This is the charge hotels add for amenities you didn't ask for and might not even use. Pool access, gym, Wi-Fi, a newspaper you'll never read. That's typically $25 to $50 per night, and it's often not included in the advertised price. On a 5-night stay, that's up to $250 in resort fees alone. Then there's the occupancy tax, the tourism tax, the city tax, and whatever other taxes your destination has decided to stack on top. These can add 10% to 20% to your nightly rate. In places like Chicago or New York, hotel taxes push past 17%. You're looking at an additional $15 to $25 per night in fees not shown in the listing price. Let's add it up. Your $89 per night room is actually costing you $130 to $140 per night after resort fees and taxes. Over 5 nights, that's $650 to $700 instead of $445. That's a 50% increase from what you thought you were paying, and you haven't even opened the minibar yet. Which you shouldn't, because that $6 bottle of water is the most expensive water on the planet. And the $11 bag of peanuts should probably come with a financing plan. Here's where it gets really interesting. We're only 2 line items into this trip, flights and hotel, and we've already gone from a projected $725 to roughly $1,185. We've added $460 in costs that didn't exist when you were doing your excited midnight math. But we haven't eaten a single meal, gotten to or from the airport at our destination, or done a single thing that makes the vacation worth taking in the first place. Let's talk about food, because this is the expense that sneaks up on people like a financial assassin wearing flip-flops. You're on vacation, you're in a new place, you want to try the restaurants everyone's posting about on social media. Totally reasonable. But eating 3 meals a day away from home is expensive. And it's exponentially more expensive in tourist areas where every restaurant knows you have no cheaper alternatives within walking distance. Breakfast at a casual spot, $12 to $18 per person. Lunch, maybe $15 to $25. Dinner at a decent restaurant, not fancy, just decent, $30 to $50 easily, and that's before drinks. If you're having even one cocktail or glass of wine with dinner, add another $12 to $18 per night. A couple of waters during the day because it's hot and you're walking around, another $5 to $8. We're conservatively looking at $65 to $90 per person per day on food and drinks. Over 5 days, that's $325 to $450 per person. For a couple, you're now staring at $650 to $900 just on eating. And most people dramatically underestimate this category because they budget like they're going to eat the way they do at home. Packing lunches, cooking dinner, making coffee in the kitchen. You're not going to do any of that. You're on vacation. You're going to eat out for every meal, snack between meals, and buy overpriced drinks at the pool without thinking twice. And here's what makes food spending on vacation especially brutal. There's a psychological shift that happens the moment you leave your normal environment. At home, you'd never spend $18 on eggs and toast. You'd think that was insane. But on vacation, your brain files it under experience instead of expense. And suddenly that same breakfast feels like a perfectly reasonable part of the adventure. Multiply that mental trick by 3 meals a day for 5 days across 2 people, and you've got the single biggest budget destroyer on any trip. Death by 1,000 small charges, and every single one felt justified in the moment. Let me pause here for a second. We've covered 3 line items: flights, hotel, and food. And most people have already blown past the number they told themselves was the entire trip budget. They're over, and they're still mentally calling it a budget vacation. And there are still 2 major expense categories left. Transportation at your destination is another expense that people somehow forget to budget for entirely. Unless everything is within walking distance, you need to get around. In most tourist destinations, ride shares are surging half the time because every other tourist is heading to the same places you are. A rental car might seem smarter, but by the time you add insurance, fuel, parking fees at every attraction, and tolls, you're looking at $60 to $100 per day. Over 5 days, that's $300 to $500. Ride shares aren't much better. You're probably spending $25 to $40 per day, adding up to $125 to $200 for the trip. Either way, it's a significant line item that didn't exist in your original budget because you were too focused on the flight and hotel to think about how you'd actually move around once you landed. Now, let's talk about the actual activities. The entire reason you booked this trip in the first place. Tours, attractions, excursions, museums. None of this is free, and tourist pricing is its own special kind of markup. A snorkeling tour might be $75 per person. A guided city tour, $40 to $60. National park entry fees, theme park tickets, boat rides, cooking classes, whatever catches your eye. Budget at least $50 to $100 per person per day for activities. Over 5 days, that's $250 to $500 per person. For 2 people, $500 to $1,000. This is the category where people consistently blow their budget wide open because you didn't fly across the country to sit in your hotel room. You're going to do things, and they cost real money. Let's bring this all together because the total is going to hurt. Flight for 2, $970. Hotel, $675. Food and drinks for 2, $775. Transportation, $350. Activities for 2, $750. Miscellaneous expenses like souvenirs, tips, sunscreen you forgot to pack, that overpriced airport sandwich on the way home, the bag you had to buy because you bought too many things to fit in your suitcase, $200. Grand total for this budget vacation, approximately $3,720 for 2 people. For a trip you originally thought would cost maybe $1,600. More than double your estimate, and still conservative because I haven't factored in impulse purchases or the "we're on vacation, who cares" moments that add another few hundred to every trip. And here's the part that really stings. Most people don't realize they spent this much until they get home and look at their credit card statement 2 weeks later. During the trip, every individual expense felt reasonable. $18 for breakfast? I'm on vacation. $40 for a tour? Once in a lifetime. $15 for a cocktail at sunset? Special occasion. Each purchase made perfect sense in isolation. But when you add them all together, you've spent more than most people's monthly take-home pay on 5 days of relaxation that you'll need another vacation to financially recover from. That's not budgeting. That's spending money you haven't counted yet and calling it responsible. But here's the deeper problem, and this extends way beyond vacations. The real issue isn't that travel is expensive. Lots of things are expensive. The real issue is that vacations are unpredictable by design. And unpredictability is poison for anyone trying to build financial stability. Think about your rent or mortgage. You know exactly what it costs every month. Your car payment, insurance, subscriptions, all predictable. You can plan around them. But a vacation? You're estimating food costs in a city you've never eaten in, transportation prices you've never paid, and activity costs you haven't researched. The travel industry knows this. They give you just enough certainty on the flight and hotel to make you feel like you've budgeted the trip while leaving everything else deliberately vague. And it's the vague stuff that doubles the cost every single time. This is why vacations disproportionately derail people trying to get ahead financially. Not because they're irresponsible, because they're filling in the gaps with optimism instead of math. Now, some of you are thinking, Kai, are you saying I should never take a vacation? Number. Vacations are important. Taking time away from work is genuinely good for your mental health, and I'm not going to pretend that life should be an endless cycle of working and saving until you die with a fat retirement account and zero memories. That's not living. That's existing with a spreadsheet. What I am saying is that you need to budget for the real cost, not the fantasy number the travel industry dangles in front of you. Because here's what happens when you budget based on the advertised price instead of the actual price. You either put the difference on a credit card, which means you're paying 20% interest on a vacation for months after you get home, or you dip into savings that were supposed to go toward your emergency fund or retirement. Let me put this in perspective. And no, I'm not saying every dollar you earn should go into an index fund while you sit in a dark room eating rice. I'm saying you should know when you're choosing memories over momentum, instead of accidentally sacrificing momentum while thinking you're being responsible. That $3,720 you spent on 5 days at the beach. If you invested that same amount, earning 8% annually, in 10 years it would be worth over $8,000. In 20 years, over $17,300. In 30 years, over $37,000. You're not just spending $3,720 on a vacation. You're potentially giving up tens of thousands in future wealth. And if you're taking trips like this every year without properly budgeting for them, the lifetime opportunity cost is staggering. Now, if you look at that trade and say, yeah, that memory was worth delaying my progress by a few months, that's a grown-up decision, and I respect it completely. The problem is, most people never realized they were making that trade at all. They thought they were spending $1,600 on a responsible little getaway. They didn't know they were spending $3,700 now, which is about $37,000 in 30 years at 8%. That's not a decision. That's an accident. I'm not saying you should never travel. I'm saying you should know exactly what you're trading. The travel industry is counting on you not running these numbers. Here's what's really going on behind the scenes, and it ties back to why that first price sticks so hard. Psychologists call it anchoring. People make purchasing decisions based on the first number they see, not the final number they pay. That $280 flight becomes your mental anchor. Everything after it feels like a small addition to something you already decided was cheap. You're not calculating the total anymore. You're just adding modest extras to a deal you already committed to. That $280 didn't just start your vacation. It hijacked your brain. It's the same reason car dealerships negotiate on monthly payments instead of total cost. Anchor to a low number, and everything else slides by unnoticed. The solution isn't to never take a vacation. The solution is to stop pretending that budget travel exists the way the industry markets it. Budget your trips based on the all-in cost, not the teaser price. If you can genuinely afford $3,700 for a trip and it fits within your financial plan without going into debt or raiding your emergency fund, go for it. Enjoy every single second of it guilt-free. But if you're booking a $3,700 vacation while telling yourself it's only going to cost $1,600. You're not being budget conscious. You're being financially delusional. And that delusion is going to cost you way more than a few days at the beach. People who actually build wealth don't avoid vacations. They avoid financial surprises. They price the whole trip honestly before they book a single thing, decide up front what they're willing to trade, and then enjoy every second of that trade without regret and without a credit card bill chasing them home. That's the difference. Not between people who travel and people who don't. Between people who know what things actually cost and people who find out after it's too late. The real luxury isn't the destination. It's coming home and knowing exactly what you spent because you planned for it, not because you're reading a statement in disbelief. That budget trip you took last summer? There's a decent chance you're still paying for it right now. And now that you've seen the real math, you'll never look at a checkout screen the same way again.